All right, welcome everybody to the Monday, March 13th, 2017 meeting of SIG Service Catalog. So we have a pretty slim agenda for today. First on the agenda, if you're ready, Vile, is Vile is going to give just an update to the group or report on how the GCP Next talk went. Vile, are you ready to speak about that now?
I think I might be. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Super. Yeah. So for the last couple of weeks, we've been putting together a talk for the GCP Next. And I believe the YouTube video of that was posted onto the chat Slack channel so that people can go in and check it out themselves. But basically, the idea was we wanted to go and demonstrate what couple of different things. One of them was what is this whole point of having service catalogs, brokers, and everything else. So we spent a little bit of time explaining the roles and responsibilities of each one of the pieces. Then we spent a little bit of time showing off a demo where we were again just demonstrating why it's really neat to be able to go ahead and not worry about infrastructure, but think about services as the fundamental building block for the applications. And we also wanted to go and demonstrate how broker is a really nice extensible concept by wiring it into, we use the stuff from the contrib directory, which is the Kubernetes Helm chart, as well as a GCP, which is Google Cloud Platform, for wiring in PubSub, as well. That's a GitHub project also. And then we also showed off a user-provided service as another one. And the other thing we also talked about is how this wires into Istio. Istio is another open source project that is trying to bring forth the concept of a service mesh, where the idea is that when services are wired together, there's typically some capabilities that you want to worry about, or rather don't want to worry about. You want to think about higher level abstractions again there, which is like, hey, I just want auth between these two services. Just give it to me. Or I want to add some throttling or quotas or things like that. So we showed off a little bit of that. And then we just kind of tied it all together that by using these two things together, you have a pretty good story for being able to say, I can go and start managing really services and not worry about the infrastructure bits quite as much. And we made the usual plugs about the status of the world being alpha and so forth, but we put the links in there, and it was very well attended, the talk. So there was standing room only. And Martin did a great job talking about it, as well as did Louis Ryan from the Istio. So there was Martin Canholm, who was representing us from the service catalog side of the things. And then there was Louis Ryan from the Istio side of things. So that's about it, unless there's any questions. And the video, again, has been posted into here. And I think, yeah.
That's awesome. So I have noticed that a few people have joined the Slack channel and said that they found it from the GCP Next talk. So that's pretty cool. I expect that we'll probably have the same thing happen after the KubeCon talk and panels associated with this work. So that's a good segue into MVP2, which is what is on the agenda to talk about next, unless anybody has questions for Vile. All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and we will just go through the MVP2 items here. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So I spent some time with Vile and Aaron and Doug today, and we went through and we pared down MVP2 to just the things that we think are like absolutely most important to get done as next steps, with the goal in mind of like we do expect that after KubeCon, which is, for anybody that doesn't happen to know off the top of their head, KubeCon is at the end of the month. It's the 28th and the 29th in Berlin. And we expect that after KubeCon, there are going to be a lot of folks that are really interested in, one, using what we've done so far, and two, contributing. So where we left MVP2 after we sorted things out is that we're going to be focusing on getting to the functional point of like we have something that we can show, which from a functional standpoint, I actually think that we're pretty close. Basically, what I want to add from a functional standpoint is support for async provision and deprovision. And then we need to ensure that like the house is in order from the standpoint of like highest possible degree of the repo documentation being together. We need to have, sorry, phone started ringing. We need to have the docs together. We need to have tests to the greatest possible degree so that we can more easily onboard people when they come on. We also need to have a way for you to be able to run the catalog without having built it yourself. So as we go through the issues that are in this MVP2 milestone, you'll probably notice that that is a general theme of just sort of clean up the house. So I'm just going to make a run through the outstanding issues. If you have any questions, just do whatever your best impression of raising your hand in this medium is. So the first one is publishing Docker images from master. And this dovetails into the last thing that I mentioned, that ideally you would not have to build the catalog in order to be able to deploy it. So that issue is to publish Docker images into the right tags from master. The next one is handle conversion of service and plan metadata into our API. So what this is like you can send a JSON object back from the broker that has metadata about services and plans in it. And there are some conventional fields that used to be documented in the API. They appear to have been inadvertently removed recently. I made an issue to add them back in, but then there are these conventional fields, and then brokers can send other fields in them. So we need to model this the right way in the API. The next one is to add some integration tests for TPR storage, which I think should be pretty self-explanatory. Next one is controller integration tests. We have some that Morgan put in a couple weeks ago before he left. Last week, I started adding on to this to basically have an integration test that implements the flow that I've shown in the demo. And in doing this, I found that like the fake broker server, not the fake client, the actual fake broker server, has some things that it needs to do more correctly. So I'm working on that one right now. Next up is related to release process stuff, like tag Docker images with the appropriate labels. I know there's been some discussion in Slack today, so hopefully we'll get that sorted out. Next one is some more test coverage needed for some of the TPR stuff. And then, hey, it looks like 488 and 529 are basically duplicates of one another. So maybe we'll just close 488 later on.
529 is the PR that closes 488.
Oh, I wasn't looking at the little icons. Okay, got it. Cool. Next is have an EDE for the walkthrough, which the demo that I've shown, we now have the walkthrough in the developer guide docs, basically being able to recreate that. And I would like to have, so my personal desired state for this is that the demo that we give for this should be the walkthrough, and that should also be an EDE, so we can, one, establish that the walkthrough stays working. Two, make it possible for anybody to just go through the walkthrough for an audience and give the same basic demo that that anybody else could. So that's what that is. Next one is make API server health check fail until all TPRs have been created. I think Simon's working on that one right now. Next one is implement async provision and deprovision. I think VLA, you're working on that one right now. And next one is another TPR, implement storage versioners, update list function. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't actually know exactly what that one is. Kent or Aaron, can you say what that one is?
Sure. So there are quite a few functions to implement the TPR backend for our API server. Almost all of them have been implemented, but there's one more called update list. I see Kent. Kent, do you want to explain this, or are you cool with me continuing? I didn't know if you were.
No, you can continue. I think you can explain it better than I can, even though I'm the one writing it.
Okay. So yeah, there are quite a few functions basically to do CRUD and watch and a few higher level CRUD-like actions in our implementation of the API server storage database that uses TPRs. There's one more function called update list that's currently not used by our controller manager, but is nevertheless pretty important to have. Update list is probably pretty self-explanatory. It's obviously to update a list of objects. So what this is obviously implementing that, but also writing some of the unit tests and also some of the underlying machinery that will be needed to implement the integration tests for TPRs, which was a previous issue that Paul mentioned. So hopefully that makes sense.
Cool. So the next one is about determining what conditions we have in the API. We have a number of constants for conditions that we don't use that were added. Honestly, they go as far back as the first face-to-face, and we should take those out to expose the surface area of things that can confuse people when they come in and look. But then we also need to figure out which ones we do actually want and need. So that's what that one is for. Next is to have a continuous integration that runs EDEs. Michael Akibe has been working on this one. And from a Slack conversation that I had with him shortly before the meeting, I think that that the continuous integration piece of it seems like it's ready to turn on, and hopefully we can do that in the next day. And then what's remaining is being able to have an EDE test that runs in that continuous integration. That's a bigger hurdle to get over because you need a Kubernetes cluster, and you need to have a catalog deployed into it. You need to have a broker deployed into it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we might recast this one to just be out of Jenkins, and then, or make a new issue to track that. It's out of Jenkins, and retain this one about CI running an EDE test for a little later.
I can comment a little bit on that.
Okay.
So, yeah, so the integration into GitHub, yes, that should be good to go. I was able to revert the GitHub integration plugin, so now we don't need the admin rights on the repo immediately. So that should be good to go later today. The end-to-end, so with that, we are able to get Travis equivalency, and the end-to-end section. So all the things you were mentioning about like spinning up the cluster and everything, I already have all that solved as it's going to spin up in GCP, but it's going to spin up regardless. So I have that section solved. So that's not hard at the moment. The only issue is now that this controller has changed a bit, I need to modify it. I just need to follow the new walkthrough basically and get the code there up to parity. But that shouldn't be actually a big issue, hopefully. If it runs on your local machine, I expect it should be running in the Jenkins.
Paul, looks like you muted.
Sorry. So that's good. What's missing is a test binary that implements that EDE. And as far as I understand, there is an issue with the pinned version of Kubernetes that we're using, so that we can't consume the Kubernetes EDE stuff until after we rebase. I actually think that there is an El Cheapo solution to it where we maybe don't even use the upstream EDE stuff, but we can talk about that later. Anyway, there are some additional challenges beyond just getting the stuff deployed that we can talk about, Michael.
Okay.
All right, so next up is support for pod preset, which is the resource formerly known as pip. We went through a couple iterations of bike shedding on the name. To do this one, we have to rebase onto Kubernetes 1.6, which astute observers will notice there is an issue for that one too. But basically, for those of you that aren't aware, the pod preset is what allows you to declaratively say, as part of the binding, which pods in your namespace should be injected with information about how to use the service you're binding to and how they should be injected with it, whether that's environment variables, whether that's volumes, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is a pretty important part of the value proposition piece for Service Catalog. So that's definitely something we want to get in MVP 2. Any questions about that one before I move on? Okay. Next one is an old issue that I created a while back. We're missing a slash out of the broker's self-link. For those of you that don't know, the self-link is a part of the object metadata in a Kubernetes resource that gives you the path for how to address it. And I noticed this a while back, haven't had a chance to spend time fixing it. I think that it will be fixed naturally as part of the rebase. And any fix that we made to it before the rebase, we'd have to ensure stayed working until, across the rebase. So there's no sense doing it because we're about to start rebasing, as I'm going to get to in a second. I just left this one on here so that we could establish that it was fixed in the rebase. And then the next issue is that registry images should be prefixed because our image names have things that are not uniquely identifiable as being part of the service catalog. So that issue is to add to change the names slightly so that the registry, the Docker name, the Docker image name disambiguates that it's part of the catalog. And then last and certainly not least, 413 is to rebase onto Kubernetes 1.6 candidate. So there have been a lot of API machinery refactors since we last, or since the version of Kubernetes that we're pinned to. And when we rebase, we should be able to do a number of things that we're kind of blocked on right now, just due to the situation in the version we're pinned to. So, for example, those of you that have been looking at the controller, some of you have noticed, in some cases, rather violently, that we use both the k8s.io/Kubernetes API packages and the client Go API packages. So as an example, the reason that we have to do that is because the dependency on the Kubernetes packages wasn't removed yet in the API machinery that we have to consume in the version we're pinned to. In the rebase, it's moved out into an entirely separate repo. So we'll be able to use the client Go packages for all of that stuff, which will be super, super duper awesome. There's a couple other things that will make it a little better. I'm actually hoping after that we'll be able to drop our dependency on k8s.io/Kubernetes. I think there might be one thing that'll keep us from doing it, but that is the goal because it's an enormous dependency to pull down. So that's what's in MVP2. Our target date for this is March 17th because we really want to get these things taken care of well before KubeCon. As a follow-up to this, we created another milestone called MVP3. I'm not certain what the timing is going to be around that, but we need to be getting to a place where we're cleaning up like small details, making the developer experience good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a bunch of stuff that's in MVP3 is around that. There's some extra functional things too, but at this point, we need to basically concentrate on what we want to show at KubeCon. All right, any questions about that? All right. So that's it for the agenda today. I'm happy to spend some additional minutes if anybody has a discussion topic they want to bring up, and if not, we can just give everybody the time back and keep working on this stuff. All right, I'm not hearing anything, so I am going to go ahead and end the meeting here. Thanks everybody for joining us, and I will see you all on the internet. Toodaloo.